Welcome tonight. Thank you so much for coming. This is the Briar Patch hosted Paul Bunyan Wears a Face Mask, a curated collection of writing by Mainers. This is a wonderfully produced local, Maine-centric anthology of writing by Mainers for Mainers during the pandemic. One of the things I think you should know about this book, the publisher is donating all profits to the United Way of Eastern Maine's COVID-19 Relief Fund. So not only is this book made by Mainers during the pandemic, but it is also benefiting Mainers during the pandemic. Now, this anthology was the brainchild of Emma G. Rose. She is a phenomenal local herself. We're very lucky to have her here. She is a contemporary fantasy author with 2 novels. So if you are enjoying her work, then you can find those. And she founded the independent publishing house Imperative Press Books in 2018. Readers love her inside jokes, her emotionally stirring characters, and she writes primarily about grief, loss, life, and what comes next in an accessible fantasy style for those books. Now, the contributors to this anthology come from Bangor, Fort Kent, Portland, MDI, and everywhere in between. They range in age from 9 to 73 years old. I won't tell you which is which. You can decide for yourselves. They're elementary and homeschool students, they're graduates, business owners, and retired healthcare workers, and the writers are veterans with dozens of published works. They're new poets submitting for the first time, and they're emerging voices. So our contributors tonight, we don't have everyone here with us who has contributed to the anthology, but our readers this evening are going to be Ardis Mayo, Sarah McCarthy, Craig Sipe, Andrea and Robert Mahoney, a mother and son team, Ben Boegehold, and we are also joined by Joe Roberts, who's the Chief Development Officer of the United Way of Eastern Maine, and we'll hear from him a little bit later. I also wanted to let you know that a little bit of housekeeping here on how to use this platform. You're going to see the contributors as they are reading on screen. Down here in the chat box, you are going to see things like links, like the one that I'm putting in right now, where you can purchase this book and help contribute to the United Way COVID Relief Fund. You can also type in there if you have a comment. You can also type in a question either in the chat box or in the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. You should see both chat and Q&A available to you. This event is being recorded, so if you want to see it later or share it with anybody else, we will make that link available as well. So thank you all so much for coming tonight, and I'm going to turn that over to Emma G. Rose.
Hello, readers. My name is Emma G. Rose, and I am the editor of Paul Bunyan Wears a Face Mask, an anthology to benefit the United Way of Eastern Maine's COVID-19 Relief Fund. I'm joined by 6 writers who will each read a portion of their work. We're social distancing by tuning in from our own homes, so you're getting the behind-the-scenes experience. Let's start things off with a reading by Ardis Mayo from her poem, Shelter Me with Silence.
Good evening. Shelter me with silence, that I may attend to the drum of my heart against the downbeat of a world swaying to rhythms of fear and upheaval. Shelter me with silence, that I may hear the arrhythmic echoes of broken and weary hearts, and teach me to make music from their dissonant chords. Shelter me with silence as I listen to the sound of my gut aching in solidarity with those whose bellies are empty and minds are full. Shelter me with silence amid a cacophony of voices and opinions, followed by a refrain of fear and sadness, as I wait in expectation for a new ballad of relief. Shelter me with silence, so I may discern the calling of mystery and feel a rhythm of hope and trust building in the hearts of people dancing in solidarity with each other. Shelter me with silence, so I can embrace this lullaby of love, calming an exhausted world into peace and stillness, and return each heart to holy quietness. Shelter me with silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ardis. If you enjoyed that poem, you can get to know Ardis a little better at her website, thereflectivepen.com. This project wouldn't have been possible without the 34 writers who contributed their stories, poems, and essays written during quarantine. These pieces explore our shared experience as Mainers during a crisis. But they also come from individuals who all face their own challenges. People like Sarah McCarthy, who lost her father in the months before the pandemic. The graveside memorial that her family had planned turned into a virtual event. I'll let Sarah tell you about it in her own words as she reads from her essay, Semper Fi.
Thank you. The other day, my sister likened how we both felt in the weeks after our dad passed to how we, and it seems many, are feeling during these days of stay-at-home orders to flatten the COVID-19 curve. Everything is quiet. We feel paralyzed. We feel loss. In some ways, our feelings of walking around as if in a trance and numbness are now validated, as others are now feeling what we felt after our dad passed on November 29th, 2019.
I can't believe you did that without crying. Thank you, Sarah. As a side note, Sarah works for the Bangor Symphony. I know they're doing some fundraising right now, and arts organizations have been pretty hard hit by the pandemic. So if you'd like to make a donation to support live music, we'll make sure you get that link. But before I get completely sidetracked, let me tell you why we wrote Paul Bunyan Wears a Face Mask. Like every other book in the world, this one started as an idea. I was looking for a way to help other people being impacted by the pandemic. The problem was there wasn't anything I could do. I'm not a doctor or a nurse. I don't work in a grocery store or run a community support organization. I'm an author. I have this little publishing house, and the words in my head, what good were they? Here's where the idea comes in. I thought maybe other people felt the same way, isolated, confused, helpless. Maybe if we all worked together, our stories could make a difference. I decided to invite people to contribute their stories. At least that way we'd all feel less alone. So that was where it all started. Before I tell you the rest, let's pause to hear from Craig Sipe. He's reading a selection from his poem, New World Shepherd's Pie.
Thank you. The hairy drain in the master sink with the liquid plumber pint poised over it for pouring is not so urgent now, but sits in the comfort of a queue, the silly rank and file of something to do when going out to the mailbox is a peachy vacation.
I wish we had time for Craig's entire poem because I really like it. So I hope that you'll flip right to that one and read the rest. Craig joined us from Orr's Island, which I had to look up, I'm gonna be honest. If you're a reader of poetry, you've probably seen his work in your favorite poetry journal. With help from generous writers like Craig, I knew we could make Paul Bunyan Wears a Face Mask a success. But there was still something missing. Connecting with like-minded people, reminding each other that you're all in this together, recording the small moments and big feelings, that's all really important. But I knew that there were Mainers who had lost their jobs, Mainers who were struggling to feed their children, Mainers who were facing tangible challenges. Words were not going to be enough for them. That's when I realized I already knew someone who could help. The United Way of Eastern Maine was already connected to the groups and organizations that help Mainers in need. If we donated all of our profits to the United Way, we could make a real difference. I approached them and they said yes. Now I'd like to hand the mic over to Joe Roberts, Chief Development Officer of the United Way of Eastern Maine.
Thank you, Emma. I just want to send a heartfelt thank you to you, Emma, for pulling this together, and of course to all of the authors that have contributed pieces for the book. It is at a time like this, we're all looking to make our mark in terms of trying to contribute to the cause, and you have all struck a chord here and participated in something that's truly special, and it really will make a difference in people's lives. So thank you so much for submitting your talents and making this possible in order to help the people in Eastern Maine. When the pandemic hit Eastern Maine, or it came to Maine in early March, United Way started the COVID Fund, and it was supported significantly by so many donors across the state of Maine. News Center Maine helped out by hosting a telethon, and we took calls right here in Bangor as more than $600,000 was raised to support the COVID Fund. $300,000 of it right here from Eastern Maine to be used for Eastern Maine agencies. So with that money, we approached various nonprofits locally and provided more than 120 grants to different agencies that needed help during the pandemic. And in most cases, that money was able to be turned around really quickly. Agencies that needed funding right away. Some of that money was used for buying freezers and refrigerators for food insecurity locations where folks were able to store food in order to make it available to people. Some of it was to-go packages for soup kitchens that used to house meals that now we're giving them away at the door for pickup, for curbside pickup for folks who could no longer come inside because of the pandemic. Other funds were used in, excuse me, right in Bangor here for hotspots for students that did not have internet access that were remote learning. And they're still being used this fall so that folks could do their homework. So the range is great in terms of the different nonprofits. Some of them were used, excuse me, some of the money was used for personal protective equipment as well. So there's a long list of different agencies that were impacted. We estimate more than 50,000 people benefited from the fund, and the proceeds from this book will go to that fund too. So we truly appreciate all that you've done in order to make this possible. And our website, the UnitedWayEM.org, has a list of our programs, as well as an opportunity to donate, and also a breakdown of the COVID Fund and where that money went. So again, thank you so much for all that you have done and all that you're doing to help the people of Maine.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you to the United Way as a group for amplifying our efforts. While we're on the subject of thanks, my mom hasn't seen the script, so she doesn't know this is coming. On the subject of thanks, this project would not have been possible without my mom, Sue Potvin. She has done a ton of work behind the scenes, copy editing, keeping me organized, contacting people. Almost nothing I do would happen without her, but this book, more than anything, would not exist. So round of applause for Mom. And while we're talking about moms, there's another mother who made a really strong, you're welcome, Mom. There's another mother who made a really strong contribution to this book. She not only submitted her own essay, but two of her sons, two of her 3 children, also contributed. We are joined by Andrea Mahoney and her youngest son, James. Her youngest son, Robert. James is the other one. James is the older one. Robert's the younger one. Sorry. Who contributed essays, and they're going to read from those now.
All right, good evening. In early March, before COVID arrived here in Maine and it all came to a halt, our oldest, who was 17, declared we should take this weekend to set up the trampoline tucked away under the deck from last fall while we had time. Little did he know, the trampoline has been a source of refuge, especially in those first few weeks of finding our footing at staying at home. It has continued to bring such joy, unexpected invitations and requests. We would bundle up and head to the trampoline once I was done with my work. I have the best memories and pictures with my kids from this time. Mom, can we read on the trampoline? Yes. Mom, can we do our math on the trampoline? Yes. Can I bring my laptop on the trampoline to finish my student reports while you do your math? Yes. Mom, can we have lunch on the trampoline? Yes. Mom, can Padme, our puppy, go on the trampoline with us? Yes. Robert.
Padme, our puppy, who is 100% a Cocker Spaniel, hasn't been out too much since everything shut down. She only saw the vet a few blocks away from our house, inside our car and inside our house, and of course in our yard. She hasn't been to friends' houses because of the coronavirus. I sometimes look outside our window to pass time and stuff my face on the couch for no reason. Sometimes we get packages we order, and sometimes when I get them, I open the door and see a wasp and freak out. I have spexophobia. The last time we were at the library, I actually checked out 59 books, and that's all. And that's about all I can think of, so I'm going to stop talking now. Go away, Corona. I need more books.
I love that piece. Okay, thank you, Andrea and Robert. I think we can all agree that we all need more books. So, if you're looking for a copy of Paul Bunyan Wears a Face Mask, or any other book you can think of, like literally, Broche will tell you how, and you can probably show the Briar Patch some love for hosting this event by ordering a book or two, or 59, if that's your thing. These times have been hard for many of us, but Gibran and his team have kept us all sane by connecting us with the right book at the right time. Reach out to them if you need recommendations. Before you all run off to get new books, let's hear from our final contributor of the evening, Ben Boegehold, reading his poem, Day 40, A Letter Overseas.
Thank you. Day 40, A Letter Overseas. You called and told me about your apartment. Each day, if you lean out far enough from your window, you can get 5 minutes of sun. And now you're 28. This world is strange. Yesterday, I watched a woman on the sidewalk pull her mask off her face, light a cigarette, and blow smoke into the cold breeze. Another 5 are dead. My faith in God is gone. I do believe in you, brother, and that all growing things have to reach toward the light.
Thank you, Ben. Ben is a poet and a teacher from Portland, and this piece is actually part of a series of about 50 poems that he wrote during the first 2 months of the pandemic. I'm hoping maybe he'll publish them somewhere. So Ben, keep us updated on where we can find the rest of those, because I'm very curious. Now, I'm sure you have questions for me and the other writers who contributed. I'll hand things over to Broche. I'm trying to say it right. I'm trying really hard for the Q&A.
Not a problem at all. I know Broche is a little bit of a difficult name to say, so thank you so much for giving it a try, and thank you all so much for reading. I invite everyone that is a panelist to unmute themselves from the video, come back on the screen, and I would love to have everyone put their questions in the chat. We've got one to start with, and I'm going to kick over to Emma. Where did the cover art come from?
Oh, that's a great question. The cover art is the brainchild of Ashley of AHD Design. She has done all of my book covers up to this point, but this one is fully her. I told her the title and what we were up to, and she made this beautiful thing out of my confused just thoughts. I'm delighted by it. Like, how can you not be delighted by this? So yes, she's amazing. If you ever need books made. You should talk to her. She's good at it.
A great endorsement, Emma. Thank you. We do have another question, but I actually wanted to follow up on the cover first and ask, so we know where the cover design came from. Can you tell us the inspiration behind the title?
I can't really, because I don't know. It was one of those things that came to me in just a flash of, this is a great idea. Because I was trying to think of something that was Bangor, that was Maine, that was, you would look at it and you'd be like, yes, this is a Maine thing and there's no mistaking. And Paul Bunyan.
Of course. Flannel. Absolutely. Yeah. This is a question from an anonymous attendee wondering, saying this is an amazing group of writers brought together for this. I'd love to open it up to our writers. How did you all hear about being part of this project? And then Emma will follow up with how you got the word out. So Andrea, Sarah, Ardis, anyone, how did you hear about becoming part of this project?
On Facebook, and I teach and work online, and so it was kind of a weird thing that everyone was suddenly home and online and working and homeschooling their kids, which we already kind of did with some of our kids. So all of a sudden everyone was like my buddy, but I needed to like kind of vent, I think. Mm-hmm. And so then she posted and I was like, oh, am I ready for you? And that's just kind of where that went.
And then magic happened. And how did your children get involved?
This one, he was really upset about the library's closing. I mean, the Briar Patch, the owner knows us. We used to stop in every Wednesday to get a book pretty much. And so, he was kind of upset. I was like, well, you should write a note about that. And he did.
It was wonderful. Thank you for participating. Would anyone else like to chime in? Did anyone else see it on a place other than Facebook?
I think I saw it, the Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance newsletter. You posted it there, didn't you, Emma? Yeah, so that's where I saw it. So I was eager to participate.
Anyone else?
Yeah,
or Emma,
I think it was in the Bangor Daily News. I just saw that, again, it was circulating on Facebook and some writers groups.
Fantastic. And Emma, were there any other places where you really spread the word?
I put it everywhere, like every place I could think of. So it was all over Facebook and all the groups I could find. I direct messaged people who I knew were connected to things that I wasn't connected to. We sent out press releases to the Bangor Daily News and all the papers that we could find in all of Maine. I was on at least one radio show. I can't remember. Mom, do you remember? She'll chime in the chat if she remembers. I was on several, different things trying to get people, and we had an immediate response. I think within a few hours of posting it on Facebook, I had people sending me things. So it definitely struck something in people.
Absolutely. It seems like everyone needed that outlet, which was just wonderful. Someone wrote in the chat, Beth McLean, that this was a writing assignment from her aunt, or maybe from Maximus. This was a writing assignment from my aunt, I believe is how that should be read.
So Max is my nephew. And we thought it would be fun when we found out that there was going to be some school from home happening. I jokingly told Max and his brother that I was going to give them writing assignments, and they were actually totally into it. And so I did. And his piece, If I Were a Mouse, is actually the first writing assignment I gave him.
That's wonderful. Do you have it? Can we hear If I Was a Mouse? I think we have the time in our event. Yeah, maybe I'll read one of the comments while you find that piece.
Okay.
Ardis, there is a comment for you. Susan says, I too am a nurse, and your piece makes me cry every time I hear it. It truly touched my heart. Ardis, you want to talk a little bit about the inspiration for your piece?
I think I wrote it when early on in the pandemic, when there were a lot of voices, voices in the news, voices from neighbors, but my own inner voices, raising questions, shouting opinions. It was just, and I needed to find a place that was a bit quieter, a place where I could feel grounded and just listen to something else. So I was inspired by the noise around me, I think, is the safest thing to say about
Beautiful.
that.
It was a beautiful piece. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Emma, were you able to find the, wonderful, let's hear it.
Okay, Max, here we go. If I were a mouse, I would want to have a house. I would want food, water, and a lot of supplies. But I'm very poor, so I do not have all that stuff. It all began with a mouse. I hated him. So this is how I became poor. I was just walking, minding my own business. Then Gaston said, "Attention to everyone," and everyone came. Gaston said, "Gather all your treasure and bring it back here." There were a couple of complaints, but they did it. Did I get my treasure? No. No way. But the guard demanded me to get my treasure. Gaston said, "Get some weapons and you guys will build the trap. While you guys do that, I will lure the dragons." Then Gaston ran off, and I never saw that mouse again. So then I snuck into this huge mammal's house. There were 9 of them. They had so much food. I drooled. It smelled so good. Can you smell it? Can you, I wonder? Then I went to Maximus's room. It was so clean. I was so happy here I could cry. I can see the best room ever. The end. And Max is 9.
That was a wonderful writing assignment. Thank you so much, Max and Emma, for sharing that with us all. I don't know that we have another question in the chat, but right now we have a compliment. Writers, thank you so much for sharing. The amount of sharing about our experience of COVID is so important and helps the journey. I would love to hear from anyone else if they have some words to say about the catharsis of writing the piece or where the piece that you read today came from. Craig, Ben, either of you?
Well, for me, it was just the, my wife and I in everyday living. I'm usually the cook around the house, and she decided that she wanted to cook a few things. So she made a shepherd's pie one night. It was really good. But that got me thinking about how we were parsing out tasks to keep ourselves sane during the time. So that's where the poem came from.
Thank you. And now I know where to go for dinner. I appreciate that. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, I found myself just, doing a lot of walking in the woods behind my house. And, you do occasional errands and you see things, you see people. And, every day there was something else that, I was kind of processing or trying to understand. At one point, I kind of realized, my brother who's living in Spain, and I hadn't talked to him or seen him in, quite a while. And so that sort of came out as a letter kind of after a phone conversation that we had. So that kind of distance and solidarity was playing out in that.
Absolutely, I can imagine. I know when I was living abroad, sometimes it felt that I was talking to people more often because this video call thing was so new. And now I feel like sometimes we're all video called out. So thank you all for appearing with us on video today. Joe, I would love to hear from you if there's anything else that Mainers can be doing right now to help the United Way efforts, other than, of course, purchasing this book. But is there anything else as we head into, yet another month and our first winter season during this time?
I guess the one thing I'd want to mention is just for folks that need help. There's a website and a phone number. 211 is the number to call for help, and it redirects folks to whatever service they may need, and it's funded by the United Ways across the state of Maine. And we track the number of phone calls, and there was well over 8,000 calls last year, and the calls really skyrocketed during the pandemic. So it is a useful piece for information. In fact, I can remember a time I'm calling it myself to say, how does this quarantine thing work? How do you explain it? So it's very useful to folks to just reach out if they need help with food, or they need help with medicine, or maybe they need transportation. They might have any number of questions, but it allows us and or different agencies to be connected for help. So I mean, we like to say during the pandemic that, if you need help, you can call 211. If you can give help, there are plenty of ways to volunteer or give back to your community. And some of us have been affected very severely by the pandemic, and we're in a situation where we need help, and others maybe not as much, and lucky to be there. And we hope that those folks can reach out to others and help out.
Absolutely. And in fact, one of our audience members, Lee White, has a question. Joe, are there any experiences of goodness that have touched you?
Well, I think one of the things that I talk about a little bit is just doing this food. We had this drive-through food drive at Good Shepherd in September, and it was one thing to see cars come through and drop off food, a couple of bags here, a couple of bags there, but then there were a number of cars that came through that were filled to the gills with food. It just you'd open up the door and food would fall out, and dropping off for the food drive. And just amazing to see essentially businesses and offices coming together and throwing their money in, and a business making a contribution of literally hundreds and hundreds of dollars of food in a car to be dropped off, and for us to sort to give to different food banks so that folks would have something to eat. And I mean, food security, I think, is increasing during this time. And it's great to have one less thing for folks to worry about. And it was just moving for me to see that firsthand. And I've heard some stories of folks that have got phone calls from that were working the telethon that just to hear from people that said, I may not have a job, but I've saved some money, and I'd like to give back and help people during the pandemic. So, and obviously the people here on this panel that have taken their time to submit their talents in order to try and help their neighbor. And it's just a wonderful thing. And I think we get pretty caught up, I think, in the nightly news, looking at some of the bad things that are going on, and wear a mask, don't wear a mask, or who knows what next. But I think we need to take a moment to focus on so many folks doing more to help out their neighbor. And I think there's a lot of good stories out there if we look for them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. I love what you said about the creatives on this panel sharing their talents. And we did have another question in the chat for Sarah, talking about, if you could, the impact of the arts in our community and how important arts, music, writing, etc. are, especially right now during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think working at the Bangor Symphony, we canceled over half of our season last spring, beginning with a concert, an event in late March, and all the way through. We had events into June that were canceled, and including, and Andrea and kids know that our youth orchestra programs were not together. So it's I think both for the musicians and our audiences, just that sense of community that we know is so important to gather and enjoy live music, art, all of that is, the power of live performance is, it feels even more poignant now without it. We've done a lot of, as much as we can in the virtual environment, but it's just not the same. I think there's a starvation for, a yearning for community and gathering. And it's hard sitting right here right now. I was talking to one of our musicians the other day, and he's practicing and he's doing some teaching virtually, mostly virtually, occasionally, beginning to do some masked teaching in person, but just, he's yearning himself to be playing along with his fellow musicians. And it's, and it's hard sitting here not knowing exactly when that time will be when we can gather. But I appreciate that question, Sue. And Emma, I think, even though we all contributed and wrote separately, I think gathering us here at least to share together has been a nice, and just knowing that this was a community effort despite being distanced. I appreciate being a part of that.
Sarah, one of the things you said reminded me of one of my, as odd as it sounds, favorite things to hear about in people quarantining, but in Italy, where neighbors on balconies would come out and play music and have almost these little like apartment balcony parties with each other, still socially distant, but that it brought people together in a way where they might not have known their neighbor 3 balconies down, and suddenly it turned out that they were this amazing musician or a singer or something. I do think it raises an interesting question about forming new patterns of behavior where maybe you wouldn't have sat on your balcony. Or I know in the United States, the 7 o'clock, make noise to thank service workers. We kind of have these new traditions that have come out of this. I wonder about any of you, if you have new writing traditions now or new creative traditions that came out of this project. Emma, did you have any new tradition or a new hobby, perhaps creative hobby that has come out of this at all, or anyone else?
I've kind of picked up baking again, like everyone. I don't know why, what it is about being stuck at home that's like, no, I have to bake things. But I've been baking, which is great for my morale and bad for my health. But also I had to learn how to do the virtual thing. And so my writing groups meet virtually. My book launch for Near Life Experience was virtual. I am crossing my fingers that the book launch for the next book will be a huge party and all of you can come, because I have this like deep desire to just overwhelm the Briar patch and have it spill out onto the street. That's my plan. So Gibran, prepare. That's what we're doing.
We have that deep desire too. That is welcome. Have any of you experienced the opposite of that? Instead of starting new habits, maybe writer's block is one of the questions from Sarah in the chat. She said she's heard a lot from a lot of fellow authors that they felt very inspired at the beginning of the pandemic, but I felt increasing writer's block throughout. So have any of you experienced that, or have you found a good way to combat that?
Well, I can speak a little bit to that. I mean, the beginning, I think on day one, I started writing, and I didn't stop until probably mid-May or so, and then there was a sort of fatigue that dropped in, where it's like, oh, this isn't going anywhere, but the part of the mindset was just like keeping my eyes open and paying attention to the things around me. And it's amazing how many different ways you can look at sort of the same path you tread, or what you can find in that sourdough loaf of bread that you are trying so hard to raise. So I think a part of it is just using the time that was given to pay attention to the things around me.
Wise, very wise advice. Absolutely. Sarah says Sarah on the panel says it's a powerful reminder. Thank you in our chat. Did anyone else have a way of combating writer's block or creativity block that they have found?
For me, after a while, I just got tired of writing about all the apocalyptic stuff. So eventually I went back to, I pretty much either try to write or revise every night. And whether it's a little or a lot. And there was that March, April, May timeframe, kind of like Ben, where I just, the COVID stuff kept coming out. And eventually, no pun intended, but I got sick of it. And not that there's not more in there, but I'm more interested in how it comes out in the end. And there will probably be a look back on it as far as my writing is concerned at the end.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure for people crafting fiction, set what should be contemporary fiction, might be hard to know. Do you set it in a pre-COVID world, in a non-COVID world, in a post-COVID world? If anyone is working on something like that, I'd be interested in hearing what you've decided to do. Emma, I know you write fantasy. Do your fantasy works have any elements of what we're experiencing right now?
Well, my fantasy always starts in the real world. But I think I might leave this part of the real world out. I don't want it. And I think I agree with Craig that these are the kinds of things that you come back to. So someday, maybe I'll write a book that's specifically set in this time. But right now, I'm in the middle of it and I can't do it. So when I have time to kind of process and I get past this space and can go back to live music and back to live book events and, hug people, then I will probably be prepared to write about it, but not yet.
Understood. And I lost the mute game. Sorry about that. We actually have a question that was submitted to us from Facebook. Question for Robert. I would love to know if this is his first publication and how that felt for him. This comes from a writing professor named Crystal Sands. She loves opportunities for children to have such authentic writing experiences. So Robert, was this your first time being published, and how does that feel?
Yes, it was my first time being published, and I'm really nervous about it. But I'm also really excited too.
Well, I think you did a wonderful job this evening, so thank you so much for doing that and sharing your story with us. That was really great. Yeah, a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if no one has any other questions for us this evening, then I just want to remind everyone that you can still purchase copies of this book at the Briar Patch. And of course, the proceeds are going to the United Way. I want to thank everyone so much for being here this evening. There is one more question. How much money did the book raise so far for the United Way?
This is the big question, right? I've been keeping it a secret, waiting for someone to ask, and my mom asked. So we have raised so far $1,700 for the United Way. Yay, clapping.
Amazing.
I'm so excited.
Awesome.
Virtual round of applause. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Awesome job, everyone.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for being the inspiration for this, Emma. Thank you for being the converger of all these incredible contributors. And again, thank you all so much for joining us here tonight, virtually, but at the Briar Patch. And I believe that there is a link that was just put into the chat as well. So we'll leave the chat open for a few minutes if anyone wants to say, virtual congrats and thanks. But this is us signing off, saying thank you all so much for being here. And don't forget that we are here for all of your book needs. Take care.